Hello, hello.
What is up, everybody? What is up? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show. And this is the Morning Vibe on September 24th. We are officially in fall now. And if you don't know me, what I do a number of things, but I am, as I said, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show 2020. Best Podcast News Award winner, 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. And I host the only online show in the world for dads and fathers that is sponsored by Dove Men Care. It's also co-sponsored by Dad Central, Canada's national fatherhood organization. And with the collaboration of those two organizations, I've been able to reach out directly or indirectly to over 75,000 fathers around the world this year. So I'm very humbled about that. And I'm the board chair for the Global Food and Drink Initiative, which is a multimedia not-for-profit that showcases Blacks in the diaspora that are doing their thing in food, drink, and travel. And as always, I like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. I'm going to hand it over to the man, Ryan Knight. I'm going to have a little bit of technical difficulty on the back end, so I'll be back in just a moment. So Ryan, take some time to introduce yourself.
My pleasure. And for those that don't know who I am, my name is Ryan Knight, one of the co-founders of the Afro-Caribbean Business Network. We work with entrepreneurs of African and Caribbean heritage to figure out what stage they're in today and help them create a blueprint to exponentially grow their companies. And myself, I do run a company called Detailing Nights, a social enterprise here in Brampton. And we are starting to expand. We do mobile waterless car cleanings. We go to people's houses or their offices, clean their car on the spot without water and using our plant-based, eco-friendly cleaning supplies. We are in our second phase of the youth entrepreneurship program. So shout out to Taj and Torian that have taken on running a business while in school. So they're in school Monday to Friday, and then, they work in the evenings and also on the weekends. So shout out to those guys doing great work. And if you have a child that's in high school or college and was having trouble finding a job this past summer, please keep in mind the Detailing Nights for next season. We're going to start recruiting in January and February.
Whoa.
So yes, keep in tune. And we're going to be
you're already talking about next year.
Absolutely. We're going to have about 20 youth in the cohort. So yeah, got to start it early.
Okay. Well, It's been quite a week.
This week, this week has been full and full in such positive ways. Hey, the election finished. We have MPs that won that technically were dismissed. So it's like there's that, and that goes to what Greg Frankson was saying, that the party is more powerful than the candidate, because literally the front page was this candidate was accused of sexual assault and he still won because his name was still on the ticket. So, and then now it's like, hey, since I won, do I still need to step down?
No, well, from the last I saw, he's not stepping down.
That's exactly right. He's like, listen, I won, and the charges were dropped. And I think the lady that accused him said she just is too much work to continue on and it's too stressful. So the charges now are dropped. Is that enough for the Liberal Party to say, you know what? Because he's stepping in for Adam Vaughan, which was a staple.
That from Adam Vaughan, who I would say is somewhat of an ally to the Black Canadian community, and then you get this. And I always,
nothing, because if he steps down, that seat's gone.
So it's really interesting. I wonder what the media would be saying if the person was Black. I'm not saying, I'm just saying.
I'm curious if they would still get their name on the ticket, because there was enough time. I thought that would have been signed, sealed, delivered. He's not on the ticket. And I think it actually happened in another riding too, where the person is technically an independent. I'd have to check to make sure if I'm thinking of the same person twice. But I think somebody else won that is technically was dropped by the Liberals as well.
Well, and the call is out. If there's anywhere that anyone can tell us the Black candidates that won, I'd love to know that. Yes. There is an organization out there. I'm not going to go on their name, that you would think they'd have a list of the Black candidates that won. can't find it. But someone from
Yes.
my community has given me a name that I should be able to get that, but it has nothing to do with that organization. So I'm going to stay like there. So
Yes.
Kevin Messam from the States, transplanted to the States. Did Trudeau win again? He did win again, but he had a minority. It was about, I think, approximately 12 to 13 seats short of a majority. So he did win again. Ryan was thinking it was going to be a conservative majority.
Yes, that was my Hail Mary. I thought it was a complete misstep by the Liberals, and he was going to suffer for it. But hey, they were saying it's like a repeat of 2019 where it almost looks similar, but it's not similar, because I think Jagmeet Singh actually has a lot more power now because he can approve or decline any of the Liberals.
He's the power broker. That's what I had said. That's what I was saying in a number of our broadcasts, that either Mr. Singh is going to be the real power broker. Right. In regards. So what does that mean, minority, Kevin? What that means is the little party got the most number of seats, but in order for them to rule, they'll need to another party such as the NDP in order to pass legislation. So that's what it means. And I think that
and the specific number, so it's 170 seats in order to get a majority. So they got 158,
something like that.
Right. So in order to get those other seats, another party has to sign off and like approve their whatever they're trying to pass.
Yeah, so it was interesting, and it's going to be interesting too with Mr. Trudeau. He's going to have to replace 4 cabinet ministers that lost their seats.
They're saying that they missed their pension, their lifelong pension, by a couple of weeks.
Oh,
you see the ripple effect of calling the election so, I guess, so sporadic. But
yeah, it's going to be interesting. I won't bring. We'll talk about in the back channel. But one of the ministers he has to replace is Marianne Monsef, and she was the minister for gender equality. Right. And I have a name of somebody that I think may get that position, but I'm not gonna bring up right now.
Listen, because I want to talk about the Anne-Marie Paul fiasco.
Okay, you know what? Actually, this is gonna walk into our guest today. So You know what? Why don't we save the post-election talk till Monday?
Okay,
so we're going to really get into it on Monday, because there's a number of dynamics we need to chat about, and things will have settled down. It's like nothing really changed. Let's get to the main fire today. And speaking of the main fire, this gentleman is a mentor of mine, has been a mentor of mine of many years, Louis Marsh of the Zero Gun Violence Movement. He was supposed to be on a few weeks ago. Unfortunately, there was a little bit of a hiccup. He's live with us today, and believe it or not, he has been on my platform at least 2 or 3 times in the last few weeks.
Yeah,
like this is Louis Marsh month.
Yes.
So we are so blessed and highly favored to have Louis Marsh from Zero Gun Violence Movement on today, talking about gun violence and an event that's happening in Toronto tomorrow. Louis, good morning, Grand Rising.
Good morning to you. Thanks for having me on the Morning Vibe.
Hey,
my first appearance.
Good.
Ryan.
Yes.
Good to see you again, my friend.
And,
same. Of course, Dr. Vibe, continue to do what you're doing, and thanks for creating this space where we can have our own discussions about our own issues.
Absolutely. Louis, can you give a short bio on yourself? I know we can spend the whole time, but for those who may not know who you are.
Yeah, my name is Louis March. I'm a community servant, a community advocate, a community leader. I've been doing this work since the 1970s under the stewardship of people like Dudley Laws, Charles Roach. My focus has been on youth issues in our community, education, social justice issues. My life is revolves around, I'm a corporate manager, financial services, and that's where my career led me. However, while I was doing that, I was also still working with organizations like the African Canadian Heritage Association, where I spent over 25 years with an organization that's been around for over 50 years. I got laid off. My department got laid off, got outsourced to India, and I got an opportunity to reevaluate my direction, my future direction. So I decided to skip the corporate world. My wife still thinks I'm going back, but it's not going to happen. I used to go to work at a jacket and tie and a briefcase. It's not going to happen. So my dedication, my work now is focused on community issues, and gun violence was the one that needed a lot more work and interrogation, because we just had a shooting at the Eden Center at Danzig. I brought some community organizations together and said, what's going on? Why are we seeing this escalation in gun violence amongst ourselves? And when I started listening to the answers, it seems as though everybody was on the sidelines, just watching and hoping and leaving the heavy lifting to politicians and police in terms of dealing with it. And I said, no, that's not where the solution is going to come from. Right. So we started off with 7 organizations. I think it was June the 23rd, 2013. Today we have over 40 organizations, agencies, programs working with us, working towards a very bold and ambitious objective of zero gun violence in the city of Toronto. And a lot of people think it's baloney. It's not going to happen. It can't happen. And my response to them is, don't tell me that. Sometimes I use the F word, because clearly we already have zero gun violence in our city, but it depends on which neighborhood you live in and what postal code.
True.
So I said, if they can have zero gun violence in Rosedale, why can't we have zero gun violence in Rexdale? So we're not asking for the impossible. If they can have zero gun violence in Hyde Park, why can't we have zero gun violence in Regent Park? And I came to the realization that there's an acceptable level of gun violence in our city, as long as it involves certain people and in certain communities. And I'm saying to myself, hell no, we're going to have to do something about it. So that was the genesis of zero gun violence movement, and the transition of my priorities and focus.
Good stuff. Louis, what is the state of gun violence from your lens in the city of Toronto right now?
In 2005, we had 52 homicides due to gun violence in our city. I call it the year of the gun. We went to Ottawa to see the Prime Minister, Paul Martin, at the time. I think it was about 36 organization representatives, including Dudley Laws, to tell the Prime Minister of Canada at that time that your reluctance to deal with the youth issues, anti-Black racism, economic inequity, lack of opportunities, lack of cultural specific programming for you, this is going to continue to get worse. The poor guy went and lost the election that year, and we spoke to the Premier of Ontario, Dalton McGuinty, the Mayor of Toronto, and we told them, if there's no serious investment in youth in our community, this problem is going to continue. So some money was put on the table by the provincial government, and we saw a decline in gun violence, shootings and homicides, to a low, I think in 2013, of maybe 20-something homicides, 22 homicides that year. But that money dried up. It dried up. There was an expiry date on it.
Right.
And then we started to see an uptick in gun violence, and it's been trending upwards since. The amount of shootings, I think, have almost tripled. Homicides are in the same ballpark area, but the amount of shootings have tripled. However, as we work across the city and work with the people engaged in the gun violence, people have done the crime, done the time, and want to make a difference. as we engage those mothers, those families that have been impacted by gun violence, we're seeing a new type of violence taking place. A gun violence with different characteristics than we saw in 2005.
Mm.
And we've also seen a lack of response, legitimate response from the three levels of government to it, beside their typical band-aid and reactionary responses. And as such, we realize that the focus now has to be on community instead of politicians and police in terms of dealing with, because the socio-economic conditions are getting worse. The poverty gap is increasing. The whole nature and characteristics of gun violence have changed, but we have not responded appropriately in terms of a response to show that this is a serious issue, not only for some people, but for all people. We have a Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, that when he came into office, said that he's from the old school. I'm from the old school.
Mm.
I believe in having more boots on the ground to deal with this issue. So what does he do? He takes out $25 million out of after-school programming for young people. And what does he do with it? He gives it to the police and say, you go deal with it.
Right.
And the police say, hello, we can't police ourselves. We can't arrest ourselves out of this problem. We need to work with community. So this is the type of typical response that we're getting from government that indicates that clearly they're not interested in dealing with the root causes of gun violence. In fact, we don't even talk about root causes anymore. We talk about the seeds causes, because it's deeper than the roots. Because when you see the roots, sometimes it's too late.
Right.
What are the seeds? Why are they still being planted?
Right.
And why do we act surprised when the violence takes place? So this is where we're at. So it's not good right now. It's trending up, but because of the characteristics of the gun violence, it speaks to a lot of other issues that need to be dealt with, that are not being dealt with appropriately. And as a result, when the violence takes place these days, it doesn't surprise us anymore. In fact, we almost expect it to happen, because the political leadership, the political courage, and the political will to deal with it has, I'd rate it an F in many cases.
Absolutely. And I'm curious because, like you said, we're not surprised these things are happening. And basically because the same seeds are still being planted. So I'm curious, when we saw funds being put in and certain programs were resourced, what were those resources that were able to start to see a decline? And also, if your organization was fully resourced, what type of things would you want to see put in place?
To answer that question, let's start with this. The first word in community safety is community. It's a no-brainer. It's community. It's not police and it's not politicians. If we look at the characteristics of, say, Rosedale and compare it with Rexdale, it gives you a clear understanding of what is required. The people in Rosedale don't worry about violence because they're economically and socially set. The people in Rexdale is the complete opposite. When the people in Rosedale walk down the street, they're not worrying about someone popping a gun violence and other forms of violence. No, because the socio-economic conditions there are well established. Then you go into a community such as Rexdale, Regent Park, Alexander Park, Lawrence Heights. You understand? You can smell the difference. You can see the difference.
Mm-hmm.
And to deal with this issue, we have to acknowledge this deficit, this gap, and we have to make a commitment to closing the gap. The thing with closing the gap means it's a long-term game.
Right.
It's not a short-term game. And our politicians think in 4-year windows. What's in it for me by the next election? The investment required in these communities where violence has become normalized is a long-term investment, a massive investment that nobody seems to understand is willing to do. So those investment means investing in okay, people always talk about programming, Ryan. These communities are over-programmed. You got programs coming out of every corner of these communities. Not the quantity of programming is our concern. It's the quality of programming. It's not addressing and engaging the population that is most likely to be involved in this activity.
But then who's in charge of auditing these programs to say, are you actually executing what you're trying to accomplish? And if you're not, resources need to be put towards ones that are actually moving the dial forward.
So in class one day, one of the professors asked, what percentage of funding dollars do you think goes toward evaluation of the proposed program and outcomes? To evaluate to make sure that you met those outcomes. So I put up my hand and I said 5%. He said no.
Come on.
So I said 4%. He said no. So I realized I'm going in the wrong direction. I got to 3% before he says no. It's a lot less. I said, hello?
Right.
So the final answer was 0.18% of funding dollars goes to evaluate 0.18 of 1%.
Right.
And I'm saying to myself, okay, there's something wrong here. You're giving out millions of dollars and there's no tangible evaluation to ensure that the outcomes match what you said you were intended to accomplish.
Right.
0.18%. So I said, how come? He said, because if there was a proper evaluation, it would show clearly that the funding dollars were not spent or issued appropriately, and a lot of people would be held responsible for that. So they'd rather not do the evaluation properly because it's going to reveal some facts that nobody wants to hear. So this is where the accountability, the responsibility, the assessment, the evaluations, so they don't even know what's working and what's not working. They don't even want to know that.
Well, that to me is concerning, because now look, we've had over 50 years of, I would say, attempts at stopping this from getting worse. And you've said, like, hey, if things stayed the same, they're going to gradually get worse. And so over the last 50 years, we've now had no real deep dive auditing of where millions of dollars have gone to alleviate this. So now going forward, I'm curious, have you seen any organizations that you would like put your stamp on, say these people are moving the dial forward, they need to be fully resourced? Like, are any organizations out there that come to, of course, except yours? I mean, we will get to resourcing your organization in a sec, but I'm just talking about the landscape of currently addressing youth violence. Are there people that are under-resourced right now that you feel should be fully resourced?
The organizations that are funded by the government, we have something we call it the funding Olympics.
What is this?
Well, go there, Dr. Marsh, go there.
So when the government comes out with funding proposals, they know who they're going to give the gold medal to, the silver, and the bronze. And then the leftover money is put out there for everybody to fight to get, compete to get.
Yes.
So in order to do that, they have to make these brilliant proposals of what they can do and what they intend to do. They have to compete with each other. They have to undermine each other. They're saying that I can do the job better. So they can't work together because they don't want to be scooped by the other organization if they share their ideas
Right.
of what was working and what was not working. So we call it the funding Olympics. So the gold, silver, and bronze recipients are organizations that they're comfortable with working. And then the other agencies on the ground, the grassroots, the up and coming organizations have to fight amongst themselves to get it.
Right.
So the collaborative effort necessary to address this problem at its core, it cannot be accomplished. It cannot be accomplished unless you move yourself outside of that funding model and find other ways to fund your initiatives, right? And there's not many community organizations that are self-funding at this particular stage. There's a dependency relationship depending on government and other funding agencies to do this work. And as such, who's pulling whose strings? So the organizations might have good intentions with good people, but if they don't get the funding to stay alive and do the work, there's an expiry date.
Right, it dries up.
On their ability. There's also an inability to sustain themselves and have the impact of a long-term gain. So this is where we have the problem in terms of funding. Which agencies, the thing about the agencies out there, the service providers, gun violence is not on their list. It's part of a larger list. So there's no focus.
Right.
There's no concentrated effort, right, to deal with gun violence. If you're going to do gun violence and you're going to do housing, mental health, drug addiction, and all these things, the focus,
right, is diluted.
Right. So I'm just giving you a picture of the landscape. So when you ask me which organizations, we work with over 40 different organizations, agencies, and programs across the city. There's no direct line. But if their work is about gun violence at a particular time, and we can enhance, facilitate, participate, we will do it. But they've got also 9 other initiatives that they're doing.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So that concentrated laser focus is not there, right? So I can't blame the organizations.
Yeah.
Right? It's the overall environment and climate. And that's where political leadership and will and courage comes in. And that's what is lacking.
And that's where I'm curious, because now if those organizations have different things on their agenda, your organization is the one that is laser focused on reducing gun violence, zero gun violence. And so now I'm curious if you've ever estimated what would it take to fully resource your organization, and has there been efforts before with all these partners and people that support what you're doing to now make that happen?
Okay, I think there's a clarification needed at this particular time. Zero Gun Violence Movement is not an organization in any way, shape, or form.
Okay.
We don't have an organizational structure. We don't have a president. We don't have a head office. We are a movement, a collaboration of over 40 different organizations, agencies, programs. We see ourselves in the same vein as, say, the civil rights movement in the United States. It was not an organization. It was a collaboration across the nation to address the issue of civil rights. There were spokespeople, right? There were leaders, but there was no president of the civil rights movement, right?
Right.
So we see ourselves in that same vein. So because we don't have the organizational structure, we don't have the reporting requirements, we don't have the costs, all the staff that work, I'm not even going to call them staff, all the people that work with Zero Gun Violence Movement, they have a full-time gig already. So they're doing this on the side on a volunteer basis. I don't get a salary, and I'm not looking for a salary. What I'm trying to do with Zero Gun Violence Movement as the founder is bring those people that share those common interests and help them do what they are trying to accomplish, because we have access to resources and services that many people do not have. We do not work in one part of the city. We work across the city.
Right.
Right. Our main mandate is simple: education and awareness. What's really going on with gun violence? Because when I listen to the media and the politician talk about that, I said, I'm not sure what they smoked that day, or did they not take their medication properly?
Yes.
Because they're not being honest and forthright.
Mm-hmm.
Our second thing is, so we fill the gap in terms of what's really going on. Because if you're going to be dependent on John Tory or Justin Trudeau or Doug Ford to tell you about gun violence, listen to it with half a ear. Not even 2 ears, not even 1 ear, half a ear. Because they will never put all the cards, they cannot. You cannot listen to the police either. Because the police is limited by, it's under investigation. It's confidential. So you can't even, like, it's difficult working with people that are holding back all the time. So education and awareness, this is where we come in.
But isn't this leading to the problem though? Because if like you're part of the movement, but there's no organizations right now that are actually dedicated to the work. So should, like, the fact that there is no infrastructure to make sure that gun violence is reduced to zero, is that where we're now left in kind of the ether? Like you're advocating for it, but to people that aren't focused on it. So maybe if we, like, would it help if we had actual organizations only focused on this topic to say, hey, we are the movement, but we need to create an entity that could now get this thing to zero, because the evaluation is now limited because there's no real infrastructure to even evaluate.
That's a good question. I'm going to answer it this way. When you go to the store and you spend $10, you're spending 13% in taxes.
Right.
That money goes to the government, whether it's federal, provincial, or municipal, so that they can organize, coordinate programs, services, supports where it is needed in a social order.
Right.
So whether it's housing, whether it's roads, whether it's transportation, whether it's drug addiction, whether it's gun violence, we expect them to spend that money to deal with these issues.
Right.
If they cannot do it, they might outsource it to organizations and agencies. And that's what they're doing. Because the politicians see gun violence as political kryptonite. They want to stay away from it because they don't see any immediate gains. Because, as I said, this is a long-term game. This is not short-term. You're not going to get your results tomorrow because you spent the money today.
True.
It's a long-term investment. So, to answer your question, yes, we have to take a look. And we have been working with the city of Toronto to bring some of these key stakeholders, whether it's policing, whether it's housing, whether it's public health, right? Trying to get them together to work at a table and coordinate their response. And they have some initiatives underway, but I'm going to be straight up. When you put them at the table and you ask them to share information and work together, you have a better chance of winning $1 million lottery because their culture does not allow them to do it.
Right. Everybody's
protective of what they're doing. They don't want anybody else sharing their information. They don't want to share it with somebody else. But the culture does not allow it. The police is trying to change, but their culture does not allow it. Housing wants to, but their culture does not allow it. The infrastructure. And that's why I say you need bold and dynamic leadership to force them to change.
Yes.
All right. Gentlemen, I'm going to hold it right there. We're going to go to a quick break. And when we come back from break, there's a number of questions and comments for Louis. So we're going to take a bit of a break right now. We're on the Morning Vibe live on September 24th. We're talking with Louis Marsh of the Zero Gun Violence Movement. Excellent conversation about gun violence. We will be back. Keep it locked, and we'll get to some questions and comments on the other side. What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, and it is Black Canada Talking time. Black Canada Talking is a live online event that provides Black Canadians the opportunity to give their takes on stories, POVs that are of importance to them, or we showcase Black Canadians are doing their thing.
The real aspect of what goes on behind the walls or behind the fence is a totally different persona and a totally different picture.
There was just a big sense of relief when we finally got there.
We have to realize that everything we do is going to have an impact on probably a lot of people we don't even know.
One of the mandates of the CBC is to reflect Canada back to itself.
Not a lot of sustainable long-term movement that will affect economic change.
God bless, peace well, keep the faith, and walk good.
All right, we're back.
And yes, we are back on the Morning Vibe, having a spirited conversation with myself, Ryan Knight, and Louis Marsh of the Zero Gun Violence Movement. So I think let's get to some questions or comments. DJ Renard is saying, but isn't that the policy's job?
I think that's police's.
Police's job, yes. I think it's probably police's. So it's that, but isn't that the police's job? Louis, your comments.
The police show up after the shooting takes place. The early intervention and prevention strategies are in other areas. The police can be part of that too. But their focus is on when a crime is committed to respond appropriately. When you look at the city budget, the policing budget is the largest one-line item, over $1 billion a year.
Right.
I'm going to talk about the quantity of policing versus the quality of policing. Putting more boots on the ground, as Doug Ford would rather do, is not the solution. You're talking about quantity of policing there. The quality of policing, let me put it in a nutshell to you. And I want you to think about this because I still haven't figured it out. When a community is in a crisis situation, something goes wrong, the first phone call that will be made is to who? The police.
Right.
But when the police show up to deal with the issue, nobody wants to be seen with them.
Right.
So hold on a second. I'm going to call you, but when you show up, I don't want to be seen with you. We got a problem there. It's about trust on both sides. It's about reputation. It's about history. It's about culture. So we can spend all the money we want on policing, but if the policing apparatus cannot work with the community in a meaningful way, and we expect them to solve this, it's not going to work. So the police are trying.
It's conflict there. Right.
But there's a culture shift that is needed there.
Okay.
And again, it's going to take time.
All right. So another question from the biggest supporter of the Morning Vibe and who wants Louis Marsh to be mayor of Toronto, Christopher Lawrence, says, I believe in the ideology of Louis Marsh's work. Can we unpack the quote playbook, unquote, to preserve and enhance the life in underserviced communities?
Thank you very much, Christopher Lawrence. As for the mayor race, I'd rather stick with my movement. I think I can have more impact. But in terms of safety, look, There's certain communities that you go into in Toronto. When the sun sets, the community becomes alive. People come out, they go shopping, they go to the restaurant, they go to the party, they sit down, they have fun. They come home with a big smile on their face, 3 shopping bags and an ice cream cone in the other hand. They feel good and they feel safe. Another part of the city, when the sun sets, people run for cover. They run into their houses. They don't want to be seen outside. A mother said to me, I've got 3 sons, and I am reluctant to have them outside at night, even to take the garbage out, for fear that something could happen. There's a big gap. Toronto has become a city of cities. And it's not right.
Right.
It is not right that certain children growing up in one part of the city, their life expectancy is going to be dictated by the postal code. You got to be joking. This is not the Toronto I signed up for.
Right.
So we have some problems here. Political leadership and political will and political courage is lacking. So that's why we have to go back to community to be the major player in how we deal with this issue.
All right. Next comment here from Simone Cordes. Just don't work with them, Popo. It is a multifaceted approach. Now we all need to collaborate with zero gun violence straight up. We need to educate ourselves to know our role. This needs to be a grassroots internal move.
Exactly. 2 days ago, I got a phone call from a mother. She was bawling her eyes out for about 5 minutes straight. She had lost her spouse to gun violence. Her son was more than likely involved in some criminal activity, and she didn't know what to do or where to go. There's something going on in our city, a grief, a trauma, a hurt, a pain. And nobody wants to talk about it seriously. I think Ryan at the beginning said, a deep dive. We've never had a deep dive into the issue of gun violence. Right. We've never had it. However, when I wake up in the morning and I turn on the news, the lead story many days is who got shot where.
True.
And every time this happens, I think of the people, I think of the families, I think of the parents, and I'm saying to myself, how come this is happening in Toronto, a world-class, internationally acclaimed city, internationally ranked in so many categories, including public safety? But when it comes to public safety in certain parts of our city, we're on the bottom. And we accept that. That's the status quo. That is unacceptable.
But that you mentioned it when you were first talking about how the government reacts to the certain number, like the certain areas that violence is happening. They do find it acceptable. Look, we're still in the top 10 of rankings. So I find that government tries to maintain the order, and they don't really try to, like you said, dive deeper into and make sure that all areas of Toronto, not just certain areas, are void of violence. But now this is where I want to see, what has your experience been with like the business community? We see Black North now, they have 500 CEOs that have signed on to their pledge. How has the business community been able to positively impact this movement? And if they're not positively impacting it, what would you say to those 500 CEOs and really to Black North Direct to say, hey, we need you to help us execute this?
When we started out initially, 8 years ago, we did approach corporate Toronto for assistance, because corporate Toronto, remember, I'm a corporate manager, so I know what corporate Toronto looks like.
Yes, yes.
I said the resources that you have in terms of training and development of staff could be used for training and development of youth workers, frontline workers, and stuff like that. Why don't you open your facility and your resources and support and bring them in to teach them? Because a lot of people on the front lines working with young people, they come in with a good heart, with good intentions. but the training and development so they can get better at their skill is seldom there, right?
Right.
So we went to corporate Toronto. But when we said gun violence, they didn't want that partnership with gun violence because it wasn't a fun topic.
Right.
Well, maybe not. It wasn't glossy enough for them.
Mm.
It was high risk. However, recently, we've noticed a change taking place.
Mm.
Some corporations have phoned and said, what can we do to help? In fact, we have a relationship right now with Sunrise Caribbean Restaurants.
Okay.
The operations manager is a 24-year-old.
Mm.
Phoned and said, what can we do to help? And not only that, was willing to put money on the table
Right.
to say, what can we do to help in terms of engaging this population, in terms of hiring, sponsorship, scholarship, stuff like that, right? What can we do? And we want to come out into the community and provide these young people with some insights as to positive alternatives in terms of. So this is a good model that we just started recently,
Right.
and we're going to build on it. But in terms of, in terms of Bell Mobility, in terms of all these big corporations,
Mm-hmm.
when they give money or they work with community initiatives, they want to make sure it's bulletproof.
Right.
Right? So, and that it's going to enhance their reputation, not make it more at risk with uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see their reluctance, but at least some of them are talking. And this is where political leadership could come in terms of providing incentives and encouragement. Because waiting on the government to deal with this, the chances are low that they're going to be successful.
All right,
So we have to bring in other stakeholders, and corporate Toronto is one of them.
I'm going to jump in here because I know we're winding down on time. I just want to catch up on comments here and one or two last questions in the event that Louis is involved with tomorrow. So first off, someone was saying Black unity and understood identity. I like that. Understood identity is the key. Make it happen. Joe saying we all know the problems. Let us look for solutions that can be implemented. Make it happen. Joe is the international offer has been looking into it for some time. We have the Etobicoke strategy. Question here for Christopher. This will be our last question. He's saying to you, he wants you to be mayor. So I'd say, you, Mayor Marsh, what 5 things can we do to close the gap? The question is to the panel. So what 5 things can we do to close the gap? So I think it's a cooperative answer. So Louis, would you like to start with 1 or 2 things?
I think the first thing we have to be real. There's a culture in gun violence now that has changed dramatically. The influence of social media to brag, boast, and threaten, access to guns. 80% of the guns found at crime scenes have been illegal guns coming across the border, right? How are they getting across the border, and how are they getting into our communities? Right? Turn the tap off. How are the drugs getting into our community? The age of the people using the guns now has gone from the mid-20s to the mid-teens. There's no code. Shooting somebody in a public space in a bright daylight is no longer an issue. When you speak to the OGs of yesterday, there used to be a code in terms of gun violence. They didn't want to bring heat into their neighborhood, so they were selective of how they used it. Now, people have 1 and 2 guns themselves, and they have no fear in using it in public.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the issues, the characters that have changed, and we have not responded appropriately. So we need to have that deep dive. We need to have that deep dive yesterday.
True.
Not tomorrow, yesterday. And we have not done it. So the solutions that are being proposed are not directly related to the reality on the street, right? The influence of rap music. We've had many shootings where someone was filming something live and the op said, you can't be doing that. We're going to come and settle a score. There's a culture that says, I'm going to out-bad you. That means if you came into my community and there was 50 rounds, I'm coming into your community, there's going to be 100 rounds fired. There's a one-upmanship. Take it. These are the type of things that we didn't have in 2005. There's a fear in our community, a level of where people want to stay in their house and play video games instead of going out onto this. These things we didn't have in 2005. So the solution has to be a deep dive. What's really going on? And then we come up with our solution. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. Everybody's got one piece and they're all floating around in the air out there and no one's connecting them.
Right.
That's what we need to do. We need to have that strategic action plan. We have a strategic action plan for potholes. We have a strategic action plan for housing. We have a strategic action plan for transit. We have for opium. But we don't have a strategic action plan for gun violence.
Okay.
So that's where the problem lies. That's where the solution is. We need a strategic action plan that engages all the key stakeholders, including the youngsters, including the mothers, right? And we don't have one.
Right. Anything else you want to add quickly, Ryan?
I'm curious to get your feedback. We've had on the show a gentleman, Errol Gibbs, that wrote the Black Empowerment Manifesto. And in it, one of the recommendations talks strictly to reducing youth violence. So I'd love to be able to send that to you, like that section, and get your feedback on it, because this manifesto is something that we're working to fully resource the recommendations. And so if the recommendations are something that you could give feedback on and say, hey, this is something that if implemented might actually have some good results, we are working on funding it. So yeah, and again, bringing the business community to Zero Gun Violence, the movement, to make sure that when you make those calls to the tellers and CIBCs and anybody that signed this pledge that said they want to support the Black community, I say it's now time to hold them accountable to those words and actually get them to put not just their money, but I like how you said opening up their training and their capacity to build additional capacity to the people doing the great work. So I think that's a great moment.
So a few things. Black Youth Jobs Toronto, big up to Sunrise Restaurant for stepping up. Chris just saying real. ACBN Kent's really sad we have to identify and weed out the enablers. Strategic plan. DJ Renyard saying Arrow is very theoretical and not practical.
That's where we have to take the theory to the people that can actually do the practical. So I want to be the practical.
Gerard, Community Development, Delta Family Center saying Ashe. So Louis, before we let you go, you have an event tomorrow that you'd like to chat about. So could you please share about it with us?
So tomorrow, one of the key anchors in our community, traditionally, historically, and even today, is the mothers. Tomorrow, we're bringing the mothers together that have been impacted by gun violence and creating an opportunity for them to say, what is the impact of gun violence on their lives and their family, right? So we're bringing mothers who have been impacted by gun violence from across the city. We're going to have a peace walk. We're going to start at Young and Bloor at 3 p.m. And the mothers are going to be in the front, supported by community, by fathers, by families, by people. And we're going to walk from Young and Bloor, and we're going to go down Young Street. We're going to take a right on Queen Street, end up at City Hall, and the mothers are going to speak about the agony, the pain, the grief that they go through, and the lack of supports that they have to deal with it. We're also going to have some young people speaking about the impact of gun violence on them. Sam, who we all know, passed 3-4 weeks ago. One of his closest friends will be speaking about the impact of that shooting on him. Mm-hmm. We have another guy that will be speaking. He was in his bedroom, and I think 20-30 shots were fired through his room. I think one of them was about 6 inches away from his head. He's going to be speaking. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, the same guy lost a close friend to gun violence at Young and Bloor 4 years ago. So a lot of people do not openly speak about the impact of gun violence on them. We're trying to create a space at this peace walk for them to say, what's going on, and then to demand some changes in how we address it in terms of support for people impacted by violence, right? And give the young people an opportunity to see what's going on and why we have to bring an end to this madness. It's killing us in so many ways, but it's a silent killing that a lot of people are reluctant to speak about. But at the end of the day, we're all paying a severe price for it.
Well,
Percent.
Louis, I want to say thank you very much for everything you have done, are doing, and will be doing. Thank you for the guidance and clarity and mentorship you always provide me. I really appreciate it. And whenever Louis and I get on the phone, one of the first things we ask each other are how it is doing. We say, we got to keep fighting.
Yes, yes.
And if anyone wants to find out more about Louis or the Zero Gun Violence Movement, just look up on any social media platform, Zero Gun Violence Movement. Go out. They have a website. Louis is on Twitter. He's on Facebook. He's on Instagram. On Instagram, it's louismarch.to. And anything else you want to say, Louis, before we let you? Because you got an event tomorrow, so you got to get prepped.
Yeah, we got some final details. The best thing to do is go to YouTube, put in Zero Gun Violence Movement. As Dr. Vibe knows, we've got to control the narrative, so we tell our own story through YouTube. Put in Zero Gun Violence Movement, and we tell our story there, what we're doing and how we're doing it. The event tomorrow, everybody's welcome. I'm calling it 100,000. That means 100 mothers from across the city, supported by over 1,000 people. We're going to have a bikers group leading the peace walk with their bikes. We're going to do it along Young Street. We're going to invite everybody to come out and listen to what's really going on when it comes to the gun violence issue. I'd like to thank you, Dr. Vibe. I'd like to thank Ryan for your insightful questions, thoughtful questions. They're not the typical ones that they normally hear. But at the same time, this platform is important. Mm-hmm. We can do better. We must do better. It's our best interest.
Okay. Well, Louis, thank you much. Last comment here. DJ Reynard says Louis is more realistic and practical in his approach. So, and there, Christopher saying, Louis March, continue to march forward.
Good.
Take care, my
opportunity, and all the best with you guys, right?
All right. Thank you, my
Always
mentor. Be well.
Soon.
All right. Great conversation. Outstanding. And I'd like to thank everyone who came on today. DJ Renard, Christopher, Black Youth Jobs, Make It Happen Show, Simone, Moy Fung,
Nice.
Jamal Wiggins, Kevin Messam from the US. So thank you, everyone, for an epic conversation today. Ryan, closing thoughts, because I know you got to jump.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I feel like this movement needs to be the people that say they're for the movement. And that goes out to the partners, that goes out to all new organizations that, one, don't have this as a priority, and two, have it as a list in things that they want to get done. We have to start being practical and getting to the seeds. When you mentioned the seeds, I started to think of, because I talked even about the roots. Let's get to the roots of what's happening. But the roots are already the seeds germinating. So now I actually wanted to ask, and I'll probably send them a note to say, have we noticed what some of those seeds are that we can start to address? Because that's where we're going to get some real long-term positive effects. And I don't think people have been asking that question. So I would love to dig deeper into that and see how we can support it.
All right. Fantastic. What's planned for the weekend? Member of the Hall of Fame.
Oh, thank you.
We'll talk about that on Monday. Don't worry.
Right. Yes. I know Sunday will be relaxing. Saturday, we got some training to do. I think we'll be downtown near Queen and Dufferin. So by afternoon, probably try to get out to the walk. But yeah, back to work. Hey, it's go time until winter. So it's go until end of November. Yes. How about you?
I have a family event I have to attend tomorrow, or I'd be at the walk. So anything I can do to support the walk, this is what I wanted to do to get that information out. Sunday, got some. I don't know what we're gonna do. Black Cat Talk. We may do a replay. Maybe I'll invite Louis back. Maybe
Yes. Finish off the month. Yeah.
the month of March,
Yes.
right? The month of
Yes.
March. But yeah, that's it. Monday we'll go into a deeper dive in regards to the election. But looking forward to another weekend. It's certainly cooled down in Toronto, so less heat. But I'd like to say again, thanks to everybody for watching. It's appreciated, not taken for granted. We'll be back. You can catch replays of this on Afro Caribbean Network Facebook page, my Facebook page, my YouTube page, and Ryan's YouTube page
YouTube as well.
and my YouTube page. So it's all over the place. And today as of today, we're broadcasting live on Twitter also. So we're on a whole my Twitter line. We're on a whole different platform, various platforms. Like I say again, thanks everyone for watching. As always, we're getting off with this. Live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions, then aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. Love, faith, and respect. Remember to give yourself grace. I'm going to start adding a new one today. Be you, they'll adjust. So I just want to leave off with that. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a blessed and safe weekend. Bye-bye.